Okay, we're continuing from the Holy Grail of Wisdom quotes by me, Pete Rogers, alphabetical order, Linus Pauling. He lived from 1901 to 1994. He won the Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 1954. And I had a lady friend who was a biochemist, and she told me Linus Pauling is as smart as three people put together. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1962, but that's kind of controversial. A lot of people thought that he was a jerk. They thought he was too pro-Soviet, fellow traveler he was called. He was denied a passport. He died of prostate cancer at 93 years of age. In his later years, he did a lot of stuff promoting vitamin C. He had done a cancer research study, which he thought it was very protective. I've heard people say bad and good about his vitamin C research, so I don't know for sure how good it was. From what I could tell, I think vitamin C does have a lot of potential if you figure out how to use it correctly. There was a guy, that same cardiologist who writes about teeth, I think his name is Levy, and he claims it's this wonder drug. And there does seem to be a lot of research studies suggesting it did tremendous benefit back in the days before antibiotics. But he also was selling it, so he's totally biased. It's very hard to know what the truth is. And then it seems like the university system did its best to discredit it because they didn't want it competing with their patented drugs. So the bottom line is I think there's some truth to the benefit of vitamin C, but I don't really know what it is. I don't know if anybody does. It's hard to sort that out. Okay, anyways, getting back to Linus Pauling quotes. First quote, as far as women are concerned, I'm old-fashioned enough to think that the idea of a woman managing the household, he said it would make her more happy than being vice president of a bank. Being at home would be more satisfying and interesting than sitting at a desk all day. So, who knows? One thing I can tell you is my mother, after she had her first kid, she was so happy to stay home, and she was like a celebrity in my family. For Mother's Day, we'd have 100 people there, and she was the big queen. And it was a similar thing sometimes for Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter, for example, because she had time to plan it all. The modern middle-aged and that ballpark age women in my family, what I've seen is they're all kind of pissed off because they work jobs and then they have to run their households and they're tired and they're exhausted. They don't have much time to plan anything, and not a single one of them ever had big parties or anything. They had little tiny parties. I mean, I don't know. They're just nothing compared to my mother. My mom was the big celebrity. You could have 150 people at the party, and she was the center of the attention for everything, and everybody loved her. Versus all the modern wives are kind of unhappy, tired, exhausted, pissed off, and bitchy, and most of the marriages ended in divorce. So, I think the old way was better. There was no competition between my father and my mother, and that was a good thing. He was a doctor. She had been a social worker before she married him. And I actually think in the end she was smarter than he was. But I don't know. Anyways, enough of all that. Let's continue with Linus Pauling. He says, "You must always be skeptical. Always think for yourself. In teaching, you do not want to cover things. You want to uncover them." Yeah, that sounds like a great professor. Somebody who wants to show you something new and interesting, rather than most professors just go, okay, we'll go by the book. Here's page 1, 2, 3, and they're totally boring. They don't really want to teach. Okay, he continues, "Satisfaction of one's curiosity is one of the greatest sources of happiness in life. Just one living cell in the human body is more complex than New York City." Yeah, that's another thing too. I was talking to a friend of mine recently about religion and science, and it's kind of obvious. The more you know, if you're honest, the more you know, the more miraculous it is, and the more it makes you want to believe in God. Most of the time, somebody who's got some type of science or biology education is trying to tell you that God isn't needed. It's usually because they're ignorant or because they're dishonest. Because a lot of people want to promote atheism because they think, that when the world returns to slavery, they're going to be one of the slave owners rather than one of the slaves. But I wouldn't be so sure about that, okay? Let's see. Here's the next quote. "Everyone should know that most cancer research is largely a fraud, and that the major cancer research organizations are derelict in their duties to the people who support them." Yeah, that's kind of obvious. Since 1972, when Nixon claimed they were going to try to find a cure to cancer, what did they achieve? Next to nothing, okay? A little here and there, but next to nothing, okay? And then nothing that competes with chemo is allowed. No one's allowed to make a video about the Gerson claims. No one's allowed to claim anything else has good results. That's like, a monopoly. It's bogus. Okay. Don't get me wrong, there is chemo good for some things, but they're not allowing any competition. You know, you read Tripping Over the Truth, Travis Christofferson's book, and how that genius lady Co made something that looked pretty good, 3-bromopyruvate, and they just credited her and ruined her career, ruined her life. Why? Because she had something that looked like it works? Hard to know. All right, let us continue with Linus Pauling. I have been asked from time to time, how does it happen that you made so many discoveries? Are you smarter than other scientists? And my answer has been that I am sure I am not smarter than other scientists. I don't have a precise evaluation of my IQ, but to the extent that psychologists have said my IQ is probably about 160, I recognize there are 100,000 or more people in the USA who have IQs higher than that. So I have to think that it's because I think harder and I think more than other people do, than other scientists do. And that is, for years, almost all my thinking was about science and scientific problems that I was interested in. Okay, he said that when he was 89 years old. What I've seen, I've been around some A-plus scientists, and what I've seen is they tend to be aggressive, they tend to be arrogant, they tend to be real confident, they tend to argue, and they tend to love the thing that they're really studying. Whereas most like average doctors and people involved in it, they just want to learn what they have to pass their tests, to do their job. They have zero expectation they'll ever find or discover anything. Okay, and it's also like, why would you want to? If you try to discover something, what's going to happen? Some corporation's going to try to rip you off. They're going to try to block you from your patent. They're going to try to steal your intellectual property or your physical property. So it's very difficult to ever make any money doing it. Yeah, we always hear about a few people who did, but you think about it, there's been very little achieved in science in the last 50 years other than in tech. You know, there's billions of dollars poured into technology because it's a way to control the population and bring back slavery. But, you know, what the heck's new in diabetes, hypertension, coronary heart disease? You know, somebody like Esselstyn comes along and they'll try to discredit the guy. But there's no push to cure anybody. Come on, please. I mean, only people who believe that are stupid people, okay? Where is it? They're still, you know, fluoriding the water, which is a poison that's been in the water, you know, my entire life. Okay, there's been zero progress on that, and all these formal institutions still recommend it. It's a crock of BS, okay? All right, Linus Pauling continues. Optimum nutrition is the medicine of tomorrow, provided one has the correct level of vitamin, mineral, and nutritional input, one can overcome disease. So yeah, it's if you optimize your nutrition, your body's a lot more resilient. What I've seen, though, is I think that you have to go beyond the old way of thinking, okay? Like I did an internist conversation, number 27 or something, yesterday. And I think that, like as my friend was saying, yeah, it was great that McDougall said, eat the starch-based diet. And I agree with that. That's like the most important big step you could take. And he said, eat 90% of your calories from starch, 5% from fruits, 5% from vegetables, and you'll prevent most of the Western diseases. I think that's true. And basically, you know, Dr. Day was kind of somewhere, but I think there's a big but here. It's more difficult nowadays than it was before. There's much more toxins in the non-organic food than there was before. There's even some toxins potentially on organic food. There's more toxins than ever before in the water. So you have to be more careful. People are getting EMF'd out the wazoo. You have to be careful about that. People are stressed out. The economy is much more poor, so they have a lot of financial, psychological stress. So what I'm saying is it's a lot harder to be healthy now than it was back in the 1980s or 1990s. Okay, Linus Pauling, next quote. The way to get a good idea is to have lots of ideas and then throw away the bad ones. Okay, so that was Linus Pauling. And that lady biochemistry friend of mine died of lupus, and I didn't know, because I was a young guy at the time. I just thought, go to a rheumatologist. Nowadays, I would have known what to do to probably save her. So it pissed me off that it wasn't taught to me. You know, as I said, you know, I knew the books. I was a great student, but the answers weren't in the books. They don't even have leaky gut in the medical textbooks. You know, I even looked at a pathology textbook from just 10 years ago, the best one, and it didn't have leaky gut in it for autoimmune disease or for anything. That's ridiculous. Okay, Randy Pausch, he lived from 1960 to 2008. He was actually 47 years old when he died. He was a very popular professor of computer science at Carnegie Mellon University who died of pancreatic cancer. He was married with 3 young children. And he knew he was going to die a couple months in advance, so he wrote a book called The Last Lecture, Achieving Your Childhood Dreams. It became very popular as a YouTube video. I'll put a link in the description below. And it was a best-selling book as well. So here's a couple quotes by Randy Pausch, reflecting on life at 47 years of age when you know you're going to die. He said, "To prioritize your time, ask yourself, if I do this, will it matter? The key question is to keep asking, are you spending your time on the right things? Because time is all you have. If you have to be picked between X and Y, which is more important? At the end of my life, which of these things will I be glad that I did?" Okay, so there it is, Randy Pausch. Okay, just a few quotes by Luciano Pavarotti, and we'll call it a day. He lived from 1935 to 2007. He probably had the greatest opera voice of anybody who ever lived. Enrico Caruso was a magnificent tenor, but I think Pavarotti had a better voice. John McCormick, the Irish tenor, I think was more pleasant. I actually like McCormick better than Pavarotti because he sings in English, and I'm just so familiar with all the Irish songs and stuff. I just love it. And you can listen to John McCormick all day long, but in terms of like a perfectly pure voice, Pavarotti's better in that sense. Like his "Oh Holy Night," Christmas carols is just off the charts magnificent. Anyways, here's some quotes by Pavarotti. He says, "In opera, as with any performing art, to be in great demand and to command high fees, you must, of course, be good, but you must also be famous." And these are two different things. Yeah, there's always a lot of good people who don't become famous. Being famous is partly being lucky. It's partly having good marketing, partly knowing the right people. It's also partly being born at the right time. When Pavarotti was a young guy, all this classical music, opera stuff was on TV every Christmas. Nowadays, there's a big push by the billionaire perverts who pretty much own most of the world and who own the TV stations to banish Christianity. So it doesn't get on. And TV stinks so bad that, nobody with a brain even owns a TV anymore. So it's just Christianity is being pushed down, pushed down, pushed down. I know that since I was young, because when I was a kid, I used to watch TV with my father, and we would watch the BBC Christmas specials. We saw things like Kenneth Clark on Western civilization, okay? We still honored Western civilization. There were still, movies about the common books. Like I remember watching the movie Test of the D'Urbervilles and reading the book. I was young. I was like in junior high. I didn't really understand it, but I read it because my father was reading it, and we're going to watch it on the BBC, and that was still a good experience. Okay, let's see what else by Luciano Pavarotti. "Learning music by reading about it is like making love by mail. Children should be given the chance to play instruments and to sing. If children are not introduced to music at an early age, I feel that something has been taken away from them. It is so important for people at a young age to be invited to embrace classical music and opera." Yeah, I think the best instrument is piano, because you can learn the basics of music, and there's often a piano in most places you go. But guitar is good because you can carry it around with you and it sounds great, but sometimes it leads to craziness with rock and roll music and drinking and other craziness. He says, "People think I'm disciplined, but it is not discipline, it is devotion, and there is a great difference." So that's Pavarotti. I hope you found that helpful.